I'm Edwin Samuelson, and welcome to the CineFiles. Today is part two, continued from last week, of our Bond extravaganza. Before I begin, I want to introduce our co-host here, Mr. Eric Cohen, our permanent host here. Thank you. Thank you for coming today.
Edwin.
And to his left, Michael Foltz. Let's continue from last week. This week, we're going to start off with, I consider, the best Bond film, which is On Her Majesty's Secret Service. After You Only Live Twice, Sean Connery was accosted in the men's room by the Japanese press, and he was hounded, and he was threatened to walk off the picture. But to appease him, the Broccolis let him out of his contract after this film, so he did not have to continue. He had a two-picture deal, and so he would just have to finish You Only Live Twice, and then he would be free of the Bond films. He was tired of playing the character, and it's obvious because that's the only character he was known as at the time, was just James Bond, and he wanted to diversify. But for this film, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, the producers looked and did a huge casting call, looked at 400 people, and chose George Lazenby as the new James Bond. Physically, he was probably the most impressive Bond, but physically he was probably one of the most impressive Bonds, and but the problem is, which many people agree, is that he was trying to imitate Connery. However, this is one of the strongest stories in the Ian Fleming canon, and it was directed by Peter Hunt, who was an assistant editor on the previous Bond films, and they brought a very interesting perspective to the Bond series that has not been seen before or since.
But that's your opinion.
That's my opinion. I have my right to introduce it, but Eric, I'm going to give this to you because I know this is a very controversial film with Bond films.
I think time has been very good to On Her Majesty's Secret Service. It was a film that was ridiculed at first, and what didn't help is that after it came out, they recut it and re-edited it for television, and there was, for the longest time, the only print available of this film was this sort of re-edited mishmash with narration. Like, they actually had this actor hired as Bond narrating the entire movie. And it was only recently, like in the last 10 or so years, where they actually came out with the original cut. And a lot of Bond fans and people will look back and say, you know, it's actually a pretty good film. Now, contrary to popular belief, the film was successful when it came out.
The second most successful film.
It was a hit. It was probably the most successful film of 1968, I think.
Second, as they say, it was the second most popular film.
So it wasn't a big failure. Lazenby did not go on to the second film because he did so bad in the first. Lazenby fucked it up for himself.
With his
Basically,
agent.
Yeah. He fucked up with his agent, became very arrogant. He thought, okay, now he's going to be this big hotshot star now that he's Bond. And basically what happened was Broccoli and Saltzman didn't want to work with him again.
All he was basically a male model.
He was a male model. He was a big fry man. It was this sort of like popular television commercial. Now, physically, I agree. He's impressive physically. He has a very strong look. And he's really not as bad as people made him out to be in the beginning. He's just not a strong actor.
He's wooden. That's his problem.
He's wooden.
And
but I think that actually adds something, because Peter Hunt actually said that he directed him in a certain way, that he wanted him to be like a very different.
Well, it's interesting you say that.
I think it takes away from
I read a very interesting criticism where a lot of people say if Connery was in it, it would be the best Bond film. And I sort of agree with that. However, this criticism said that, you know, the Bond that Connery was may not have worked in this kind of film. Only because this Bond needed to be a little insecure and unsure of himself, and this kind of Bond needed to believably fall in love with someone like Diana Rigg's character. However, I think Connery could have pulled it off, because the Connery Bond of From Russia with Love and the Connery Bond of Dr. No could easily fit into our
But I will give it this one little caveat. Now, both of you guys mentioned on the last film, Connery's last film for the time being was You Only Live Twice. Now, you both say that Connery seemed impatient, uncomfortable, pissed off, bored. Imagine if he brought that and upped it a little bit more in this film. It would have ruined it.
Well, the thing is, though, it's a different kind of script, and maybe if he saw the
but
script,
it's still Bond,
he may have been challenged. But at that point,
I do agree with Eric. I agree with Eric.
And it depends too on.
I don't know.
Originally, On Her Majesty's Secret Service was supposed to, I think, be filmed
before You Only Live Twice.
After Goldfinger, actually.
Yes.
Because what happened was they did Thunderball straight after, because the Kevin McClory thing popped up. So rather than fight him in court, they said, well, let's just team up and we'll do this. We'll make this the next one. And that's what screwed the whole continuity. But I mean, I think On Her Majesty's Secret Service is a really good film, and I think it's probably the best written Bond film.
I agree.
In a while, with the exception
It
of...
is a very, very well-written Bond film.
And it would be interesting to see what would happen if Connery was in it. I think Diana Rigg is very good in it. She's the best
to me,
Bond
the
girl.
best Bond girl.
the reason I like it, and I think it works very well, is number one, as you said, it's very well written. Probably the best written Bond film. I mean, it has a really good screenplay. It's very well directed. Also, I think George Lazenby is probably the best action Bond. Those scenes where he is fighting are absolutely amazing. Some of the best.
But the scenes that kind of kill for me, there are scenes where you're just like kind of wincing, like in some of the humor scenes and scenes where he's like impersonating that genealogist, you know, and you can tell he's dubbed, and that stuff is just like, it's painful to watch.
It is painful, yeah.
It kind of takes you out of the film. Like I said, if they had a better actor in there, then it would really.
But to give them credit, I blame the producers more for that than George Lazenby, because they should have, changed the character a bit so that he could play it.
Hey, I'm not disagreeing with you. I think it's a great movie, and I think that if Connery was in it, it could be.
I think
do you have George Lazenby somewhere in this room?
I think he's.
I mean, Telly Savalas is the best Blofeld. I think.
I was just going to say that Telly Savalas
no, Telly
was
Savalas.
the best
I think it's the best
Blofeld.
Blofeld. He's the closest to the
closest to the book, right? Exactly. Because once again, he was supposed to be like Red Grant in From Russia with Love. He was supposed to be the physical and mental equal of Bond.
And what I like, another thing that I like about the film too, that I like I said, the action is great, especially the ski sequences. The last hour is all the action. It just keeps going and going and going.
The toboggan sequence is awesome.
So they get first he's on the rail car. Then he's trying to get away. They're in the car trying to get away again. Then they're in the toboggan.
The whole bobsled thing is great.
Amazing.
That is a wonderful.
And the ending is really
downbeat.
Well, what I want to say though is that out of the films that we had seen so far, and to be honest with you, the films afterwards, this was the first Bond that had really an emotional core to it.
Yeah,
that's why I like the film.
An emotional core.
Yeah.
And then when you see the ending, the very tragic ending, and then you realize that goes on to explain why Bond might be such a non-committal person when it comes to his female counterparts in these later films, is how deeply this had affected him.
Right.
Well,
agreed.
The final thing before we move on to the next one is that, like you said, I think the reason that the film works so well is their emotional core, is the relationship between Bond and the Countess, because you really see that he loves her so much, and it just works. You really feel devastated at the end, and it works so well.
Well, actually, it's kind of interesting, though, because Diana Rigg actually hated George Lazenby.
That's not true. They said it was a rumor. They said it was never true. George Lazenby said
I've
it was
heard that a
exaggerated.
couple times.
Yeah, I don't know how true that is either.
But it didn't
their
show
chemistry
on screen.
wasn't bad. It wasn't bad.
But what's interesting about was their faith in casting Lazenby. She was top billed, not Lazenby, which is sort of interesting how they promoted that film.
And as a little kid, I was used to two Bonds, Connery, more. Then when this film came along, as I was watching, and I was very, very young, I don't know, 9, 10 years old, something like that. As I'm watching, I kept going, all right, Bond's going to appear any moment now. He's going to appear any moment. Sometime we're going to see Bond. I don't know who this other guy is, but sometime we're going to see Bond. And the film's almost over. I'm like, Bond's got to show up at some point, and the whole time I'm thinking this guy is impersonating Bond, and the real Bond's going to show up.
That was the criticism of the film, that he was impersonating Sean Connery.
Yeah.
It's my favorite Bond film, even though it doesn't have Sean Connery. If he was in it, I think everyone would agree it probably would be the best Bond film. The one thing that I think we all can agree on is it has probably the best musical score in the Bond series, with the John Barry theme.
It's got a wonderful song with Louis Armstrong.
Soundtrack.
And which was his last work before he died.
You won't, yeah.
We have all the time in the world.
The
beautiful song and beautiful film. It deserves a rediscovery by fans. All right. Well, after On Her Majesty's Secret Service fiasco, the producers, the studio wanted Sean Connery back at any cost, and so they gave him at the time an unheard sum of $1.4 million.
It was a last-minute effort.
Yep.
Too, because we could have had what would have been the first American cast as James Bond, who was John Gavin. John Gavin was signed to play Bond. And the producers, not the Bond producers, not Broccoli or Saltzman, but one of the guys behind United Artists actually made a bid for Connery in the last second. And so they had to give John Gavin sort of a sympathy.
And John Gavin is from Psycho, just in case you guys don't know.
John Gavin he played Caesar in Spartacus, But John Gavin could have been James Bond.
But Sean Connery came back, hairpiece and all. Took $1.4 million, and he got 2 films of his choice to be made. One of which was, I believe, I cannot think of it. It's a great film by Sidney Lumet, very good little detective film.
The Offense?
Yes.
The Offense is phenomenal.
A phenomenal film, and another film. But and he donated his entire salary to the Scottish of charities, and he decided to do the film as a fun, venture a goodbye to the Bond films, which at the time, I guess you could say, was sincere, but he did reprise his role years later. Diamonds Forever, great theme song, but it's considered by many, not myself, to be a very weak film in the Bond canon. Mike, I'm going to give this to you because you probably are the most opinionated about this one.
Well, not so much. It's I think without bringing in Never Say Never Again, which we'll mention later, of course, but I thought it was the weakest out of the Connerys, definitely the weakest. There were some elements in there that just threw me off. But then there's other elements where it's not so bad, like some of the camp works. It's a very campy Bond.
It's probably the most campy Sean Connery.
It's the most
It's
campy
a Roger
out of
Moore
Connerys.
film starring Sean Connery. I mean, that's basically
Exactly.
what it is.
For instance, Mr. Kidd and Mr. Went. Crispin Glover's father is one of the Bond villains.
Bruce Glover.
And they're actually very effective. I like them. I like them as villains. They're completely ridiculous, but they are fun. They are fun. And like Eric said, you expect them to be in a Roger Moore film.
They're a lot of fun.
I had a lot of problems with Jimmy Dean in the film. It's very, very strange because the Pork Sausage King shows up.
I like
at the
his
end of the
sausage, and
film.
I like him in the movie. I thought he was a lot of fun.
Very, very strange.
But I thought he was good in the movie because he's supposed to play this unorthodox.
What I
redneck
like
character.
about Diamonds Are Forever is Connery coming. I like Connery in it. Connery looks like he's having fun in it this time, and there's a lot of criticism about his look in the film. He looks a little overweight, and his hairpiece is a little obvious.
The hairpiece looks atrocious.
But I think there's a bit of a maturity there. It was like quintessential 70s cheese. What I didn't like about the film is that not once does he seem to be in any danger.
That
Not
is true.
once.
That is true. I want to say
like
this
he's on
before
vacation.
I forget it. One of the hottest Bond girls in Jill Ireland.
Not Jill Ireland.
I mean, I'm sorry. That's
That's right. That's Chuck Bronson's wife.
yeah, that's Chuck Bronson's. Jill
St.
St. John. Jill St. John.
Mrs.
Oh
Wagner.
my God, she was so hot.
This is
And-
more like a Matt Helm movie.
Yeah.
Actually.
The only thing disappointing about Jill St. John is the fact that she had an affair with Henry Kissinger, which I just will never understand.
Well, let's not get into that. That's a different show. But
He could have been a great Bond villain.
Yes,
Henry
he could have.
Kissinger.
But
Mr. Bond.
of all the James Bond, Sean Connery Bonds, this is probably the one I revisit the most because I think it's the most fun. I don't think it's the best film. I'm not gonna kid you about it, but I have a real good time with it. It's really fun. In fact, like you said, he looks like he's on vacation. If you look at him in the beginning of the movie, he's wearing a vacation gear in the opening segment, the little teaser segment.
It's not as bad as everybody
No,
says.
great theme. It's probably one of the best theme songs too in the series.
Once again, Shirley Bassey.
And
returns.
Guy Hamilton. And the reason that the film is as campy as it is too is because Guy Hamilton, who directed Goldfinger, came back and upped the ante a little bit, and they just decided to have a good time. And it's a fun little movie. Also,
It's watchable.
Check out the DVD, which is very interesting. It has deleted scenes with Sammy Davis Jr., and it also explains a huge plot hole, which has drove me crazy for many years, with Natalie Wood's sister, just being found and her demise, how she met her demise, where they knew where she was. They find her in a pool. Yeah, it's a deleted scene. Very interesting, but definitely one of the most fun Bond films. But if you're looking for a really good Bond film, like in terms of well-made and real story, don't look at this one.
No, it's fun.
It's fun.
It's
fun.
fun. It's
It's-
fun
it's-
and it's flawed.
Yeah.
It's a Matt Helm film more than it is a Roger Moore film.
And
I'd say.
also, Bond, even though they were close on nudity, they never really got to nudity. This is pretty close because Jill St. John's walking around in clear lace panties, and you can kind of see that from behind.
Oh, I want to mention too. There's some very funny moments too. I love is when he kills a man and he slips his James Bond's wallet in there, and they find out it's him from his Playboy.
Peter Franks.
Yeah, his Playboy.
That's actually a
mansion
great
card.
sequence. That's the
a great
best scene of
sequence.
the film is actually the fight he has in the elevator. That's the only thing that's like exciting.
That's really exciting.
It's a very well done scene.
Actually, there is. You mentioned you said you didn't feel like he was in any danger. There is a scene where he's almost in very big danger.
That's the scene where he's in the elevator.
There's another one too where he's in a coffin and they're putting him in there.
Yeah, they're
Uh,
putting him in the
at that point though, they've
That's
established
funny.
he's such a
That's
Superman
funny,
that
too.
you don't.
Yeah.
At that point, I'm like, oh, he's gonna get out of that. Something will happen.
Oh, and don't forget Charles Gray as Blofeld. He was a lot of fun.
Exactly. Oh, well, that's where, I'm sorry. I was just going to reference another film, but then you had Jimmy Dean, the Pork Sausage King, once again. You had his wonderful bodyguards, Bambi and Thumper.
That's
The
correct.
hot
That's
black
correct.
chick and the hot white chick.
So I guess we like this film better.
Yeah, now that I'm talking about it, I
Than
don't
we
mind
set
the
out
film
to
at
do.
all.
I think these two guys will be revisiting the film. I just watched it recently.
Anyway.
I had a great time with it.
So onward
Let's go on to
to
next film.
Live and Let Die.
Live and Let Die. Well, let's start off that. Live and Let Die is a very different Bond film from the previous ones. This one went back to the roots, I guess you say, of Dr. No, and it was shot on a very low budget compared to the other ones, and it was shot at 1.85, unlike the previous few Bond films, which were all scope. It's this time Roger Moore takes on the role, and
Who they wanted as Bond for a very long time.
They did want him.
Well, he was
available.
the Saint.
and he was also he was older than Sean Connery at the time, which is very unusual.
Well, he's about a year older than Connery, but he started playing Bond at an older age than Connery started. Connery was incredibly young when he started playing Bond. People don't realize this. He was barely 31. When Connery started playing Bond in Dr. No, he was like 31 years old, which I find incredible.
Yeah,
And George Lazenby was like 29.
he was the youngest Bond at the time.
But I think that's good, though, if you can find an actor that's young that can play that maturity, because I think you start off on the wrong foot by casting an older actor.
you run out of time.
You run out of time.
But
exactly.
Roger Moore started playing the part like 41 or something like that.
I thought he was 37.
No, he was in his 40s.
Really?
Because he turned 50 when he did
He does
Spy Who
look.
Loved Me.
Well, in Live and Let Die, he does look younger than 41. He
No,
does.
I mean,
he looks good.
He looks
looks
better
okay.
in his earlier Bond films than his
I
later
mean,
ones, most
but I
definitely.
think the one reason why he was probably looked at for Bond for a while is he proved his mettle with the Saint and he proved his mettle with the Persuaders.
Well, the reason they wanted him is that he was supposedly. You can correct me. Ian Fleming's version he was a very connoisseur of fine wines and a really classy guy. And Roger Moore had that. Like you said, Sean Connery was more of a street tough guy, even though he did.
Well,
do
the irony was that Connery was actually closer to Ian Fleming's concept than Fleming was willing to admit. I mean, if you read the books, Bond isn't a gourmand. Mm-hmm. There's things that he's picky about. He's a bit of a compulsive obsessive, in terms of what he likes to eat for breakfast and stuff like that. But he's not a gourmand. He may not be an expert on fine wines and stuff like that. But Roger Moore fit the role of what Bond was part of the tradition of the English gentleman hero kind of concept, and that's why they always wanted to go back to Moore. He kind of fit that kind of dashing kind of.
Well, I'm going to go on record with this. The Live and Let Die is probably one of the better films in the Roger Moore canon, even though it's probably one of Roger Moore's weaker performances. Roger Moore, The Clash wrote a song about him, rightfully entitled One Emotion, with his eyebrow, and I happen to agree. The Live and Let Die has
Once again,
elements.
that's your opinion.
Let me finish. I don't interrupt you. Let me finish. You can comment after me.
You're not the boss of me.
Yes, I am.
No,
but,
you're not.
Live and Let Die takes a lot of elements from the very popular films at the time, the blaxploitation films, and adds them into it. In fact,
I was
going to
say
America.
James Bond meets blaxploitation.
It is. He goes to Harlem and he goes.
But it works.
I like seeing Jeffrey Holder as the bad guy and the great. His demise is awesome.
Excellent.
I think in a while, like a lot of the villains and characters in it are more memorable than they've been in a while. In a Bond
Kananga.
film. I actually think
I didn't
it is
think
one of Roger
Yappi Kotto
Moore's
was-
best too.
Yeah.
I
I
didn't think Yappi Kotto was as good as the other characters. I love Julius Harris, with his metal hand. I thought he was terrific.
Yeah, no, I
Wonderful.
like those little bizarre. It's like you said, they had the bizarre touches in Diamonds Are Forever, but this time it worked.
Whisper.
I really didn't, and that's another thing too. Was that Gloria Henry? I didn't care for her as a Bond girl. I thought she was one of the weaker because she felt like she was reading her car.
She just seemed a little hysterical all the time, and her
Yeah,
act
she's a little
wasn't the
annoying.
best actress
and her
in the
role
world.
was to scream a lot and be annoying.
She's
Jane
much better in
Seymour,
Black
very,
Caesar.
very good.
Jane
What was
Seymour's
she, 22, 23?
Gorgeous in this film. She's really hot.
And probably with the most famous title song at the time because it got nominated for an Oscar by Paul McCartney in The Wings,
Yeah, Live and Let Die,
which
exactly.
covered
Great
by
song.
Guns N' Roses and ruined by that.
But
But I hate that Pepper. What's his name? Sheriff Pepper. What's his
Clifton
name?
James.
R.J. Pepper. Or R.W. Pepper, I'm sorry.
R.W. Pepper. God, I hate that.
That's a
See, I
stupid
like it.
character.
I thought that
it's
was
like suddenly
funny.
becomes Smoking the Bandit.
Yeah, it was an odd little touch, but
Before
for some
Smoking
reason
the
I
Bandit.
didn't mind it. Like him getting on the CB going, there's black Russians. I mean, it's kind of funny. I mean, but for some reason to me, it kind of fit in. And when you're
Well, I'll give you that, but it makes more sense than putting him in the next film we're going to talk
Yes.
about.
Hold on, I'm not through with this because Live
sorry.
and Let Die is my favorite Roger Moore film. I absolutely adore it, and the reason why is I absolutely love the villains. The villains made this one from the top, like you mentioned, Jeffrey Holder. Yaphet Kotto, it was a little bit of a stretch having him as Mr. Big because that makeup is so terrible. But I mean, come on.
He looks like Mephisto.
Unless you're
the
unless
makeup,
you're like
all the
10
makeup
years
was
old,
really bad.
Unless you're like 10 years old, you're gonna figure out that Mr. Big and Kananga are one and the same.
Well, it's a low-budget movie, very low budget compared to the other Bond films.
Was it really low budget?
It
Low
was-
budget
it
though?
was a
Because
low
they spent
budget.
a lot of money in the stunts. This
There
is
was
the first.
a lot
This
of-
is the first Bond
lot
film
of
where
locations.
the stunts become
They
like
cut
the
corners.
star of the thing.
They cut corners on other things though to make up for the action because it is 185, which is a lot cheaper.
It's the first, but that stunt they won Guinness Book of Records. It's the first time they did like a complete corkscrew in the air.
No, that's actually Man with the Golden Gun.
Oh, is that Man to go? I take that back. Sorry.
Yeah.
Interesting little tidbit that you'll see off the documentary when they take Bond to the alligator farm.
Kananga, the man.
And Kananga's alligator farm, and they put him on there, that they actually had a stuntman jumping on live alligators where Bond does that.
He was actually the guy who owns the alligator farm.
And he did it
yeah,
3 times.
and yes, and the man that owned the man that owned the alligator farm was named George Kananga. And he used to have a lion that patrolled the grounds,
That's awesome.
a real live lion, until the alligators ate the lion.
An interesting introduction of the Roger Moore character of James Bond, I would say.
He didn't quite get the Roger Moore character. He was still trying to be a little bit Sean Connery.
Very rough around
it's
the edges.
Weird, yeah.
He didn't find
The
himself.
best theme song by Lulu.
He did not find.
Man with the Golden Gun, you mean?
Well,
Yes.
that'll be next. But he didn't really find his footing until later Bond films, I think. But this was an interesting introduction.
Man with the Golden Gun's an interesting film.
Now, Man with the Golden Gun, which will be the next film, a great song, as you mentioned, by Lulu.
It's not a great
favorite.
Bond film, but there's moments in it where it's like, there are moments like Roger Moore is kind of a bastard, kind of like Connery was in Dr. No, where he slaps people over, and slaps a woman around to get what he needs and stuff like that. I think the ending is just so weak. I mean, I love the idea of Christopher Lee being a Bond villain, and I love the idea of this guy that's the greatest assassin in the world, and how Bond's fooled into thinking that this guy is out to get him, but it turns out he's been tricked into.
Oh, I like that Christopher Lee is a bad guy, but what's so? And he's Ian Fleming's cousin, by the way. I just think this movie sucks. It bored me to death. I tried to like it.
There are good things in it, though. The whole thing when he's in Asia and he wakes up and he's in that karate school and his escape from the school, and that's a good little sequence there. I don't like any of the
Christopher
Sheriff Pepper
Lee,
stuff.
great villain, needed more to do in the film.
Well,
He wasn't given a whole lot.
Yeah, it just kind of like, I don't know what they were thinking with this film.
Well, and he also has an introduction of a third nipple to be identified. I thought that was kind of weird.
Scaramanga.
And also, let's not forget Knick Knack, Hector Villachez, as the
Hervé Villachez.
Hervé Villachez. But he was a lot of fun to watch in his little scenes where he's attacking Roger Moore.
So let's go on. Let's so we
But,
know that.
I think
do
this
you have
film-
anything to say about it?
I love the Man with the Golden
I think
Gun.
it
I
stinks.
think it almost seemed like the sets, especially when you're on Scaramanga's island, it almost seemed like the sets were built by Saul Bass. That's how
I love the sets, but it seemed like so unnecessary. It's like one of those films where like it didn't quite. Okay, there's this character. It felt like, okay, we need to have a quintessential Bond ending, so let's just force this idea on the end of the film so that Bond has a place to escape to with a lot of explosions in this great set, even though this isn't that kind of villain. It's compelling enough that he's the world's greatest assassin.
to make the laser cannon
Right.
and the explosions.
And it just seemed like they just force all these things on it just to justify
I
that kind of ending.
I love the hunt. I love the hunter and the prey and how that is reversed. I do like that quite a bit. I like the idea of the Golden Gun. I mean, I think and having Maude Adams, great Bond girl, even they killed her off in the other one. What's her name? The Peter. What's her name's wife? Brooke.
Brick Eklund, who's
Britt
probably the
Eklund.
most annoying woman on
Not
the
great.
planet.
Not great as.
Well, we only got a couple minutes left, but I want to say Man with the Golden Gun is not high on my list of priorities. I'm not a fan of the next film either, but it's considered by many to be a really good one, and it's The Spy Who Loved Me. After the successes of the other 2 films with Roger Moore, which is The Live and Let Die and The Man with the Golden Gun, they decided to spend a lot of money, and they did a huge super deluxe big budget movie, which was The Spy Who Loved Me, and returning was Lewis Gilbert from You Only Live Twice.
The only problem is they didn't have a script until like 2 weeks before they started shooting.
And it shows.
And
because
Anthony Burgess wrote a script. All these guys were hired to write a script. But I think it's technically it's the best Roger Moore one. I wouldn't necessarily say it's my favorite Roger Moore one.
Now, why do you say it's the best?
I think technically it's the best. I mean, it's the best directed. It has the best sweep to it. Roger Moore, you feel like he's finally comfortable. He's found his footing in the role. There's a lot of elements there where everything seems to come together in the right way. I think the problem I have with the film, the reason why I'm not the fan of it, that a lot of critics say it's the best Roger Moore one, but I think it's too much like similar Bond films. I do acknowledge it's a very entertaining film. I mean, I can sit through it more than a few times. I've never find it boring or anything.
Well, you kind of go back to the original formula that we had from Thunderball, which was let's have a grumpy old man as your villain, as your main villain. Although he's not bad. What's his name?
Kurt Jürgens.
Yeah, Kurt Jürgens.
Fine German actor, Kurt Jürgens.
And I like his base a lot, his base of operation. Once again, very surreal, goes back to the You Only Live Twice of having this like almost alien craft sitting in the middle of the ocean.
Credit goes to Ken Adam again, who did both sets.
And I also love the introduction of Jaws. He's better in this than he is in the next film, Moonraker.
Richard Kiel. Got to meet Richard Kiel. He is physically, I saw him in a chair. They actually had to have a special chair for him to sit down in.
Fascinating.
You look at him and you go, good God.
Also, I think that Barbara Bach is a pretty decent Bond girl. I liked her as the Russian agent. I liked her quite a bit.
I think she's good. I don't think she's great. I can't believe that she was the best choice for that role.
I thought she was a better version of Ursula Andress's character.
I think she's a little wooden in this film.
I think she's very wooden in this because most of her film acting was in B movies, and it's obvious in this one.
And all I could think of is that, you know what, of all the actresses that were out there available to play that part, that's who they went with. That's the only thing that hits me.
But if you compare her with some of the Bond actresses down the road,
they've had some, Diana Rigg was a casting coup. I don't know the actress's name who was in From Russia with Love, but she's lovely. From Russia with Love, whoever that. And I love that relationship that develops between her and Bond. But in this one, I don't know. It's just I just kept thinking, why is she? Is it Catherine Bach or Barbara Bach?
Barbara Bach.
Duke of Hazards and the other one.
Catherine Bach is.
And then Caroline Munro is in it too, but she's dubbed for a few moments. She plays the henchwoman for Kurt Jürgens. Batman.
Right.
The reason I don't like this film is I think it's absolutely so silly. It's ridiculous.
Basically, it's a remake of You Only Live Twice.
Oh, we're running out of time here, but
I don't know. I actually quite
like it.
I quite enjoy it. I love the beginning, them dumping. What was it? They dumped Blofeld into the smokestack.
No, we're talking
no,
about
that's another film. That's a few films
what am
away.
I thinking of?
Follow Your Eyes Only. We'll see you next week at the same time for part 3. Thank you.